and welcome to the very first episode of the Machiavelli Podcast. My name is Julia Keizer, second year political science student and this year's political activities coordinator. Facing the corona crisis, I could not sit still and wanted to continue with online activities. And after a while, the idea of making a podcast was born. In this podcast, we will have talks with students, experts, and other interesting people about any issue that is related to this current pandemic. Today, in this first episode, we will talk with 3 political science students from all around the world about how they are dealing with the crisis in their country. How is Spain trying to control the strict lockdown measures? What is happening on the Dutch Caribbean island Sint-Maarten? And why did Sweden take the unusual step of not implementing a lockdown? These questions and more will be answered in the first episode. But before we start, one small thing. If you have a cool idea for the next episode, please feel free to send us a personal message via Facebook or Instagram, or send an email to pak@svmachiavelli.nl. Alright, stay safe, sit back or take a walk if you can, and enjoy! Alright, let's start with calling our first guest of today. So, welcome Ole to this first. Hello. To this first podcast. Could you please shortly introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Ole. I'm originally from Germany, but I'm here in Spain with my family. I'm a first-year student of political science, and yeah, this is my first podcast.
And where are you right now?
Right now, I'm in a town called Calpe, which is between Alicante and Valencia, in this kind of southeast of Spain.
Nice. And you told me you have a swimming pool, so that's nice. And how are you doing? How are you handling this corona crisis?
Well, I'm doing quite well. I've heard that people are bored, but honestly, I feel like I wish I was bored more often, because I kind of find something to do all the time, so quite well.
Oh, but that's good. And how's the situation right now?
Right now it's a little bit weird. The streets are quite empty, so when you go around, I've been grocery shopping a couple of times, or I went to the doctor once, and basically there's a lot of police controls, very few cars, very few people, nearly no people at all. And it's a bit weird. Like, you go on a police control, normally you're used to it. You see a police officer, you ask you for like identification and your license and stuff, and now they ask you questions like, where are you coming from, where are you going, can I see your ID, can I see your registration for where you live, and if you don't even see their faces. It's because they have this surgical mask and their police cap, obviously, and now they've even stepped it up a little bit, and they have these plastic shields in front of their faces.
Oh man!
So you can barely see the person you're actually talking with, and it's quite weird to be in a police control like that.
But do you have to have like a small form with you where you like write down what you're gonna do, or don't you need that?
No. So basically, normally I can just give you an example. Like, a couple of days ago, I went to Mercadona, which is basically a supermarket here, and I was stopped, obviously, because they cancelled all the entrances to the town but one. So you're forced to go through that one, and that's police control. So they stop every single car, then they ask you, where are you going? And I said, Mercadona. And then she asked me, like, where are you coming from? I said, Madivia, which is like a little the place where I live in this town.
Mm-hmm.
And then she asked me for like the registration, which is basically just a piece of paper saying where, I'm registered, which I showed off my mother, obviously, because I'm registered in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
But that was sufficient.
Ah, shit. Damn. So you police on the streets all day.
Yeah.
Wow.
It happens sometimes that you don't get into police control, but I would say that's rare, because they have here also the civil guard, which is also some form of police in Spain, but a military background basically. And if the police is not there, they will be there, and So someone is always there.
Yeah, to check if people are not going inside, not going outside for no sufficient reason. That is a sufficient reason right now. And how did the corona crisis in Spain develop? Like what was the strategy of the government first and now?
So first, I think it was I forgot his name. I think it was Fernando Simon or something. He's basically the head of emergency medical service. I don't know for sure. I'm not an expert on that. He basically said that somewhere in February that Spain will only see a few cases and not a lot. So there's nothing really to worry about. And then in a matter of 6 weeks, things kind of escalated, and so they started around the 11th of March, I think. Yeah, beginning mid of March, they started to stop like big events and stuff. And a couple of days later, they announced a state of alarm and the lockdown measurements in Spain.
Yeah.
So, and since then, they've been obviously. It was first 15 days, and now it's nearly a month now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And how are people in Spain dealing with this crisis? Do you feel like there's like a sense of unity during the crisis, like you saw in Italy, people on the balconies, in Spain as well,
for
right?
Sure. Every night at 8. I live a little bit uphill, and this major town is a little bit more to the coast. And basically, you can hear even from my place, which is I don't know. 2 kilometers away, maybe 3. You can hear them clapping, and at 8 o'clock, all the church bells go on. They start like fireworks. All the police put their sirens on, which is quite funny because I always know when it's 8 o'clock now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock again. And sometimes we have something that they call the civil protection, which is also some form of security here. And they sometimes drive around the villages, the surrounding little organizations, and playing music and all that, just to raise morale a little bit. It's quite cool.
Wow. But every day at 8.
Yeah, every day. It's always a little bit different. Sometimes you can only hear the churches, but sometimes you can hear a lot of noise and a lot of people celebrating. So it's
wow.
Quite interesting.
Yeah, that is.
I follow like the Ayuntamiento, which is like the basically the commune on Instagram, and they have really cool videos of people singing on their balconies, and it's really cute.
Yeah. And are you getting used to it by now? Do you feel like you're getting used to it?
It's not something you really want to get used to, but you kind of accept it, and life goes on.
Yeah.
Uni is online. So you have to get used to it, otherwise you get depressed or something. You really don't want that.
Yeah.
So you have to adapt.
Yeah, I can imagine. I also like the first few weeks were so weird, and I couldn't like every minute I was watching the news. But by now it is weird that it's even weirder, I think. But you're getting used to it indeed.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I was walking my dog the other day, and I saw like a military airplane circling our town.
Yeah.
I was like, why are they doing that? And well, I found out that often they are looking, and they're also using drones for that. They are looking for
drones. You said?
Drones.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah, they're using that to see if there are people in big masses somewhere, and we have to send in police. Because the military is also stationed in the country now, not in my town, but in some regions. I think 1,500 soldiers are in the country, and obviously the police and the Guardia Civil, and it's a lot of people and forces that are currently still working to keep everything in order. And that's what everybody's applauding for at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, so the people are the people who are outside and actually enforcing that the lockdown measures are actually taken to be serious.
Yeah. And at the same time, they are strict, obviously. They have to be, but they're extremely nice. So, like, if you go into police control, and my Spanish is very broken, until non-existent, and
Oh,
they try with like their hand and their feet to explain what they mean, and you always get what they mean.
yeah,
They are really nice, and they try their best. So, I'm very grateful that they're here.
yeah. That I can imagine that, and it's I think a good feeling that there's some kind of unity during a crisis, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's also like they're all moving a little bit closer together.
Yeah.
For example, my neighbors and I, we normally, we meet together to have like, barbecue or something, and that doesn't work. So now we are talking to each other from our roofs. And
Nice.
there is still this possibility to talk to each other, and I mean, social media is great there.
Yeah, that's true. But
I mean, something like this as well.
yeah,
So that you
yeah.
have some communication
Exactly. Because
outside of your
like social distancing is okay, but you have to like stay in contact with people and call them or do something via Zoom or anything else. Yeah.
Exactly.
Spanish Prime Minister said like once the number of new infections was under control, a progressive return of new normal will be continued. But do you have any idea how this like new normal will look?
Well, I mean, I've read a lot about like experts saying this and this is going to happen. I can very well imagine that it will be economically very, very draining for every country. And I mean, the EU, they just decided on a huge package of, I don't know, 500 billion euros. I don't know. I just read it this morning really quickly. And I think they can really like show that, they are really there for the people at this point. But I think there will be quite a bit of economical damages in every country. Especially also the unemployment, especially in Spain here, where it's already quite bad. It will get worse, and obviously that's very sad. On the one side, on the other side, what I also read was that there will be this new joy of life. Like there's a huge boom of joy, and everyone is happy to see each other again.
Yeah.
So I think that might also be the case, or maybe a mixture of both. But yeah, I think what's important is that we have to be clear about that. It's not just going to be overnight that we're going to be from 0 to 100 again. It's going to be step by step. I can imagine like slowly the businesses are starting to open again, but that some restrictions will still stay in place while others will be abolished. I can imagine that taking place.
But it's a long breath, you're saying.
Yeah. I think it will. I think slowly and step by step is the master solution.
Yeah. But is Spain already testing a lot? Because that's an issue that's being a lot discussed.
I don't know if they're testing a lot. I know that the testing, if I wanted to get the test, for example, is really expensive.
Yeah.
We're talking about 450 euros for a single corona test. So I don't know if they're testing that much.
Mm-hmm.
I think not, because they're probably not a lot of people are willing to pay that much money.
Yeah.
Even if the insurance covers it. They're trying a lot with preventive measurements. They are cleaning the streets nearly every day. I can maybe send you pictures later of that.
Yeah, will be cool.
It's because our mayor is very active on Facebook, and she sends a lot of pictures of people in full hazard suits.
Oh wow!
The bins and like cleaning everything. It's they are working.
Really?
I would say their asses off.
Yeah.
To try their best,
Yeah. To conclude, do you have any tip for people who are sitting at home and listening to this podcast? Any tip? What is one thing you would recommend? It can be a small thing.
Well, first of all, I would say be quite positive about it. At least you're. A lot of people say I have to stay at home, but the truth is you can stay at home, and it's protecting yourselves. Then I think what helps me a lot is like a kind of a daily routine. I don't stress myself about getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning or something, but still do something for uni, cook something, so that you still stay in this normal life and you don't sleep on the couch every day and watch TV.
Yeah.
Which might also be nice.
Yeah. But that's a really good advice.
it's really like to try to live on,
Yeah.
and not, it's not really a vacation, but it's kind of a forced vacation at the same time. So you have time to do things you have never tried before,
Yeah.
which is always great. So yeah.
Well, that is really good advice. I also was thinking, are you dealing the best with this crisis? And I think indeed, getting some structure to your life and just wake up every day. Not that like when I at first I was waking up every day at like 12 or 11, and it wasn't really positive for my whole mindset. So then I decided, okay, I wake up at around 9, 10 ish, and that's all right. I mean, and then indeed like structure your life. Do some things like your study, then you will feel good about yourself as well. Well, I want to thank you. I want to really, really thank you for your talks and your stories. Hopefully, you don't bump into the police that much, because I think it can also be a lot. Yeah, it's weird to bump in them every day. But yeah, thank you, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks. That was Ole sharing his stories from Spain, where there's a strict lockdown at the moment. We're now moving to our second guest, and he's at the Dutch Caribbean island, Sint-Maarten. Welcome, Sid. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks for asking. Could it be better? Back home in Sint-Maarten with 28-degree weather right now, with the
Not too
family as
bad.
well, so
Yeah.
can't complain.
Yeah, how are you handling the corona crisis? How are you spending your days?
How am I spending my day? So it haven't changed quite drastically for me. I still have to work, on my academic life. So we still have
Yeah.
lectures, we still have exams, and everything's being accommodated online, which is nice. I still have work with the FSR, so the Faculty Student Council, and everything there is also, we can also accommodate that online. So it's not too different. The only major difference is missing that physical human contact that we used to have
Yeah.
outside of this corona crisis. And I think that's the hardest part to cope with, because although we might have these virtual meetings every now and then, and we're talking to people, just the physical contact. So if you guys know me, you know that I'm a hugger. I'm a very big hugger type, so I like to go around hugging people, or simply sharing that vibe, and I miss that a lot.
Yeah. Well, for the people that don't know you, could you please shortly introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a third year political science student, specializing in public policy and governance. I come from the island of St. Martin, and I'm sure many of you are not familiar with where that is or what that is. So, St. Martin is a tiny island of the Caribbean, shared by two countries. We have the Dutch side and the French side. And I'm from the Dutch side, so that explains what led me to Amsterdam and the Netherlands in general. And St. Martin's still part of the Dutch kingdom, so that's something that's quite relevant to know as well.
Yeah.
Um, the current situation in St. Martin is that we're under a 24-hour curfew. So unlike the Netherlands, where you can still go out and maintain social distance with each other and go to the groceries and wherever you want to go, in St. Martin, it's very different. Like, I'm looking down at the streets right now, and the streets are empty. There's not one single car that's moving about. Um, and the only sort of movement that is allowed is for people working in the emergency services, so on the front line in the field of like the medical center or the police, military. You have volunteers who are helping out, package like food packages for the underprivileged, and so these are the people who are given a special pass by the government. So the prime minister and the chief of police, they have to sign this pass, this waiver for you to be on the road. And if you don't have this pass and you're caught on the road, um, then you receive either a fine or you can also be prosecuted. So it's very, very strict compared to the Netherlands.
But you can go to the grocery store, or can you?
No, you can't.
Oh,
So
I mean,
you were advised by the prime minister beforehand to ensure that you have at least 2 weeks of grocery supplies at home prior to this curfew.
Wow.
And she advised everyone. I don't know if you saw this viral video from the prime minister where she was addressing everyone to buy crackers, buy sardines, and these other stuff like oats and whatnot. It was to portray that role of a strict mom, letting people know that, hey, look, these are the rules that we're going to put in place, and we're not going to alter them for anyone under any given circumstances.
Stop moving. Simply stop moving. If you do not have the type of bread you like in your house, eat crackers. If you do not have bread, eat cereal. Eat oats. Sardines. You're supposed to have a 2-week supply for hurricane. And at the beginning of this, I said, prepare your disaster kit as if you would for a hurricane. That meant some people went out and buy toilet paper and water. The water is not going to stop. The toilet paper is still in the stores. What you need is food. You need to ensure that you have food, because if I have to take everybody who is saying that, at least 50%, shut it down completely, regardless. Food will also not be possible for 2 weeks for you to buy, because the workers in the food market will also have to stay home. Keep that in mind. But do not run to the supermarket today to buy for a month. As I said, buy for 1 to 2 weeks.
But how did people respond to that strict measurement? Like, how did people respond? Were there like, were people running to the stores and like grabbing everything they needed, or what was happening then?
So, you cannot please everyone, right? Like, no matter what you do, there will always be a part of the community that will be happy with what you propose, and others that will be disgruntled by it. So many people applauded this move because it is something that is needed to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus. St. Martin's population density is the 10th highest in the world, according to the last, I think it was in 2017 when I checked this. So if there are so many people living per, so many square miles of the island, then the spread of the disease is even, it's more likely that the disease spreads.
Yeah.
And when that is the case, then you need to implement such strict measures, otherwise it will rampantly spread across the entire population, right? So many people were happy that she took these measures. Others were not as happy because, not everyone has access to the sorts of funds to buy groceries for a period of 2 weeks. Some people work on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So like you have taxi drivers, you have persons who work in the market, for example, and they simply can't afford groceries for such a long period of time. But the government has measures in place to help these sorts of people out, such as packing food baskets, and they're going around delivering these food baskets to these people to last not only 2 weeks but a month, because they know that, okay, these are people who are vulnerable, these are people who need help, and the government actually has a registry of these people from beforehand. And if there's anyone who enters these circumstances, then they can contact the government for assistance, and it will be provided, maybe not immediately, but within the next 2-3 days or whatever it might be, as soon as possible.
Okay. How is the healthcare system on the islands like coping with this crisis? Because I can imagine like it's way smaller than in the Netherlands or in any other country.
Yeah, definitely. So to make things clear, we don't have a hospital on the Dutch side of the island. We have a medical center.
Okay.
And when you have this distinction, you already can imagine the sorts of implications that are in place, right? So as far as I remember, we had 2 ICU beds at our medical center. And when I first came to the island, these 2 ICU beds were occupied by persons who were not suffering from symptoms of corona. So you can only imagine the dire need for more ICU beds to handle other cases, right? One of the reasons that the Prime Minister explained for the lockdown in one of her press briefings was that the reason for having a 24-hour curfew was to limit the number of accidents that you have per day, right? Yeah. So when someone ends up in a very serious accident, it's more likely than not that they'll need an ICU bed. And when you have such limited number of ICU beds, then it's very difficult to, determine who gets the position on the ICU bed. Is it the person in the accident, or the person who's suffering from corona or any other sort of disease? So what the government did is they reached out to the Netherlands, considering that they're still our kingdom partners, we're still within the Dutch kingdom. Yeah. And we were given, if I'm not mistaken, 12 ICU beds, or enough supplies for 12 ICU beds, and they're set up in tents at one of the sports complexes, and persons now have access to this. We also received, or actually from the United States, there were, I think, 21 doctors that came in, and with various specializations. So you had a respiratory system specialist, you had a skin specialist, and other sorts of specialists who came in to help the doctors and nurses on the island.
Wow, so you're like slowly building a bigger healthcare system, as I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, but it's hard to determine how long this will last, or whether this is only going to last until the corona crisis is over, or whether these, of course, the healthcare professionals will have to return at some point to their home country, but whether the ICU beds or the other supplies that we were given will be, will remain on the island after this corona crisis is over. So that's something we have to wait and watch.
Okay. Yeah. I like, as I already said, like I can imagine that Sint-Maarten gained a lot of money from tourism. Like, how are people and the government as well dealing with like this? I think in enormous like economic backlash on the island.
It's hard. It's very difficult. It's imperative, or at least I assume that many of these companies will end up closing down before this corona crisis is over. Yeah. So for the island, at least, the impact of the coronavirus is still quite intense. But I think the economic crisis will have more of a larger impact than the corona crisis. As I mentioned, over 87% of our national income comes from tourism. Yeah. And when there is no form of tourism activity that's taking place, so no tourists entering from any of our ports, which are currently closed, so the harbor and the airport, there's no movement there. Yeah. Then you can almost virtually say there's no income coming in, or little to no income coming into the country. So it's very, very difficult time for everyone here. Yeah.
Like to end it positive, do you have any advice for people that you notice that's helping you coping with the crisis?
Okay, so I have several bits of advice for people. The first one is that when we were at uni, we had a fixed schedule on a daily basis, or at least somewhat fixed, right? Now that we're home, then that becomes difficult to maintain. So something that we'd usually work on for an hour, we'd spend 3, maybe 4 hours working on it, right? So to prevent that from happening, what I do for myself is, if I know that an assignment would usually take me 1 hour, and because I'm at home and I know that I can get it done later because I don't have uni to go to, or I don't have to go and meet my friends or something, then I would have spent 3 hours working on it. Instead, what I do now is I put an alarm. So after the 1 hour period is done, then I know, okay, I should have been done by now, and I, not rush to finish it, but motivate myself to finish it sooner. My second piece of advice is that there are many things that are being done online now. So if you're bored, if you're looking for something to do, there are many courses. So on Coursera, for example, there are several universities around the world offering courses for students to deal with these times. And of course, you might have enough from the UVA already, but someone like me, I only plan to follow one course for the rest of the semester, as I did 4 in the last block. So what I did is I signed up for courses online, and that's always nice because it keeps you occupied, it keeps you motivated, it keeps you working. And of course, this is not something for everyone, right? Like, coming out of this situation, knowing that you've received the rest that you needed, or you've received the time, to just chill and do what you want to do, is also just as valuable as learning a new skill or following a new course. So based on your situation, you're the best judge of that. But for me, what worked is I signed up for a course on tourism and hospitality management, which only takes 5 weeks to complete. And at the end of the course, you receive a certificate, which is pretty nice, I think, from Florida Atlantic University. And every week you only have 3 hours of lectures, and you have like 2 readings, which probably take up like, so one of the readings took me an hour, and I think it's not too bad.
No. Ah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So keep yourself busy. To make a time slot for yourself, and also enjoy it. Is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, definitely. So
Good advice, Sid. Good advice. Well, I want to thank you for participating in this podcast. Listen to your strict Caribbean mom. Enjoy your breakfast, right?
yeah, now it's breakfast time.
Yeah.
I'm sure my mom's cooking up a nice meal.
Nice. That is some beneficial thing. And thank you,
Yep.
thank you, and good luck. Stay safe. Enjoy. Make
Thanks.
some
You too.
more coloring paintings, and
Yep.
we stay in touch.
Good luck.
So, and this brings us to our final guest, Jana, from the country where the whole world looks at with amazement, because schools and bars are still open. Yes, correct. I'm talking about Sweden. Welcome, Jana. Could you please shortly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, thank you. My name is Jana. I am a first-year political science student at the University of Amsterdam, and I'm originally from Sweden. And right now I'm back home.
Cool. And how are you doing? How are you handling this corona crisis?
I'm doing quite well, actually. I'm out on the countryside, so it's very peaceful and quiet. And yeah, despite Amsterdam not being that hectic, it feels nice to get away a bit from the city. So I'm doing good.
Cool. And do you also have the space to go outside and walk around a bit, or in the nature maybe?
Oh yeah, plenty. I think my friend, she got lost in the woods this morning, literally. So there's more than enough space. Yeah, it's us and the cows and the sheep.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
And where exactly are you in Sweden?
So I'm in a small village called Bjuråker, which is roughly 300 kilometers north of Sweden, Stockholm, I mean. And it was, still snowing up here, so it was weird leaving Amsterdam. It was 23 degrees, and here it's like 2, 3. Spring is coming soon.
Oh, it's actually snowing outside right now.
Yeah.
Wow, what a difference! What a difference! And you told me that you had to take like a heavy journey, a 4-step journey to travel from Amsterdam to Sweden. Can you tell me the story of your journey? Like it's weird to travel right now in this corona crisis, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so it was kind of like an escape plan. It felt like some kind of coup. But
and like can you tell me a bit about like the current situation in Sweden? Like what is happening? What are the current measurements that the government is taking right now?
Right. So, I mean, the situation in Sweden, I guess, is the measures that people are taking themselves, I would say, very similar to other countries. It's just that when we talk about legal enforcement, it's quite different because Sweden has this kind of long-standing tradition of not having any enforcement upon people, because the current argument from the epidemiologists is that to have a sustainable policy that people are going to follow and not get tired of and rebel against, it's better not to enforce anything. So it's better to have more lax regulations and to just, strongly advise and encourage people and just rely on the citizen trust.
But do you feel like people in Sweden are taking their own like responsibility and not going outside that much and not moving again, or do you feel like why does it work, you think? Like, because in the Netherlands we had like some problems with people who are still going outside, and why do you like, I mean, what is the difference then between the Netherlands and Sweden?
I think that Sweden has a natural predisposition to being very socially awkward. I mean, I can count, like I can't even stop counting the amount of times me taking a bus or train to high school, and I would see people in these mathematical, almost measured out distances between each other. People like avoid talking to strangers on the street. People would rather not even come into physical contact with someone else. On the bus, on the train, people don't even sit in the same kind of couplet of seats. So it's very, like, naturally Swedes are very much to themselves and don't interact much. And it's I guess it is quite liberal in the sense that there's not that much enforcement from the government from above, even if we have like a quite a strong presence in government and so on.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's maybe why it's working decently, but I think there are definitely aspects that aren't working as well. I think the main issue is that there hasn't been enough testing at all. So there's quite a big hidden figure, the amount of people infected. I think the number is so much bigger than what we know right now, because if you look at the death toll, it's not really making sense.
Yeah.
And I've seen kind of old high school acquaintances, being out partying, which is really disturbing because they pose a risk both for immunocompromised people and for others.
Exactly, like examples like that people are still partying. I mean, don't you think that like the Swedish government should take more strict measures?
Right, and that's why they are, because I mean now they're going to start having much more rigid controls on restaurants and bars, making sure that there's not more than 40 or 50 people in a facility, and they have to keep a 2-meter distance. If they don't, they suspend the license, so to speak, for these places to be open. So yeah, they're starting to like properly tighten the measures.
And what are the current measures again in Sweden right now? Because bars
are
still open, right?
So with schools, all high schools, as far as I know it, are closed. Graduation ceremonies in June, which is like a really, really, really big tradition, are completely canceled. Universities are closed. All my friends are studying from distance, just like what UVA students are doing right now.
Yeah.
So I think with like primary schools, some of them are open, and I think that's for the reason that there's so many kids who have parents who work in the public sector or who work in really important sectors, and if they have to stay at home and watch the kids, then you have a much less workforce capacity, and then the whole system is much more fragile, and you can't have like a long-term sustainable, like it's more difficult to flatten the curve if you have no one to work with the ones that are sick, so to speak.
Okay. So it's actually not an enforcement, but people are willing to do it by themselves, is what you're saying,
exactly, right? So they leave clear instructions and guidelines, and then it's up to the people to follow them by the best of their ability. And they emphasize continuously that, do not make a journey unless you really have to. And like, please do not visit your grandma. Like, please do not do that. But yeah, I think the issue comes down to, how do you justify traveling during Easter? Like, what is the necessary trip during Easter? That's kind of the hypocrisy.
Is it not, don't you think it's not too difficult for people to make those decisions themselves? Like, that's my, I don't know if that's a question that is also raised in the country, but how are people like smart enough to make those decisions themselves and see, okay, can I go see my family right now, or I can't? How are
I think that's what time is going to tell you, whether the population is actually that smart. Because I think the rational, side of anyone perhaps is to say that no, but just like have a total lockdown, shut everything down. But it's also, I remember watching a TED Talk a few weeks ago with some kind of public health expert, and I think there is also the point with, if you have too rigid of measures when the cases aren't too bad, it's going to be such a contrast to when people are in full lockdown, and then when they open everything up again, there might be a second wave, and then the healthcare system is going to be overburdened. So I think maybe just like personally, I think that in a country like Sweden, I think that maybe only goes for very particular countries like Sweden that are small and etc. and sparsely populated, also where most of the cases are concentrated in the urban area of Stockholm, the capital. I think that this type of policy might work better than having very rigid measures, and then with people starting to rebel, and then it kind of becomes a tragedy of the commons where, but if I visit my grandma, it's okay because no one else is going to do it, and then more people do it anyways. So I think those issues are going to be persistent in a country like Sweden, regardless of whether you have strict legal enforcements or not.
And there is like some experts like question the Sweden strategy. Like, how do you feel about those critiques from experts who are like looking at Sweden and questioning the strategy? What do you think about that?
I mean, to some extent, I think it's really good that there is some kind of scientific debate and that there's inquiry and that there's scrutiny. That's really important because that makes people aware and reflect and so on. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. And I also that people assume, or that like just like I don't know, like third parties assume that, oh, but they want to create this herd immunity. They just they have no. It's like anarchy. It's like an anarchy, or you can do whatever you want, and they're just gonna let everyone get infected, and like it's some kind of experiment. And sure, it is kind of experimental, but I think that goes for every country because we haven't seen anything like this in history. So, and my point was that I think with the whole herd immunity discussion, what the Swedish government has proposed, or what the national epidemiologist is talking about, is that long term, like until we have a vaccine, we hope to, by having these kind of moderate measures, it's going to be sustainable and it's going to be feasible for people, but it's also not going to be too hurtful on the health. It's not going to be too straining on the healthcare system or the economy. And in the meantime, like we try to have like as a gradual and kind of damage minimizing exposure as possible. And I think but so, because I saw this Vice video the other day and I was really surprised by the narrative, because it was like, oh, business is as usual in Sweden. It's like it's absolutely not as usual, because everyone is taking some kind of measure at least. I don't think it's possible to live your life as normal when the streets are this empty and where most businesses have closed anyways.
So you're actually saying that Sweden is not taking like Sweden is not going on as usual, right? That's what you're saying. Like
no, exactly.
I think to be honest, that is like a misconception maybe, that that people think that Sweden is like going on as usual. Like there are pictures like newspapers where people sitting at bar, or I don't know, going out. But like you're saying right now, it's not the usual as the usual.
And then what? Exactly. And then what I can say is, like, take a look at Vondel Park when it's sunny and it's 23 degrees in Amsterdam. I swear I've never seen it busier. So it's
And how do you feel like the Swedish people are dealing with the crisis? Like, are they ready for working from home? Is Sweden ready for working from home, or were they not used to it at all?
I think that in Sweden we have quite a lot of like freelancers, and there's a lot of like a home office or these kind of private office culture. But there's definitely people that struggle with it, and there's definitely entrepreneurs or businesses where it isn't feasible to work from home, or people that have large families, or people that work in sectors like, I mean, doctors can't really work from home, a fireman can't really work from home. So it's a lot of people are unfortunately losing their jobs as well. I think
we were already talking about this, but do you feel like there's like some sense of a relationship between the Swedish culture and then the way the government acts? Because we were already talking about that people weren't that eager to get in touch with each other on the streets before the corona crisis, or the social contacts were different. But how is the relationship between like the Swedish culture and then the way the government acts?
Well, I think there's a strong, I guess, perhaps then link in how the government forms its policies, because they look to empiricism. What policies has the government had in previous similar crises, or what works. How does our welfare system look? How do family constellations look? Because Sweden has, I think, the largest amount of single households in Europe, if like not in the world. It's like 40% of people are like living alone in this country as well. So it's quite different. It's not really that much of like a nuclear family culture, I suppose. And
so there's also like a sense of unity in the country right now.
For sure. Like my friend and I, we talked the other day, and I was like, why is everyone so friendly all of a sudden? And she's like, it feels like people are, even if they're staying indoors, they're still coming out of their shells. So people are trying to step it up, and there's so many initiatives to do groceries for elders and for compromised people. So like my friend's grandma, she has relatives to do groceries for her. And my mom in the hospital, she says that there are so many companies and entrepreneurs and restaurants who have like breakfast and meal deliveries to doctors because they work like 18-hour shifts or more sometimes. So it's just making sure that people stay like healthy and have the energy to work and like try and help out. So I'd say that civil society is definitely more there's more solidarity, I think, now. And people are definitely stepping up their game.
Oh, wow. But that's like in a sense a positive change, right? That people are like
Yeah, for
looking
sure,
around
for
and
sure.
helping like their neighbors or their grandma or someone
Hmm.
who can
Yeah.
take care of him or herself. Like maybe as a like a last question, how do you like think the situation in Sweden will develop in the
Mm.
next couple of weeks?
Right. So, I think I'll just try and kind of stick with the predictions of like public health workers and
Yeah,
epidemiologists. So they think that it's probably going to peak around the end of April. So, like the big wave is kind of coming now,
yeah,
and then yeah, like I guess it's going to be peaking, and then somewhere around May we're going to see some kind of come down, and in June hopefully most things, probably not everything, will be somewhat more stable again.
yeah.
um so, and to me that sounds like a fair prediction, I think.
Do you have any advice for people or students who's sitting at home right now, or just anyone who's sitting at home and like what was your like most valuable insight in these days?
Oh, I mean, I think, yeah, just staying sane by really keeping in touch with people, talking out, but also trying to like be creative, have like a film marathon. I see people having like book marathons, or
Yeah,
like try to, now's the great time to learn a new language or work on a hobby, just making time for the things you usually don't have time for. So, also like go out in the woods, go out running, and
yeah.
yeah, just
As long as you can, of course, as long as you can.
as long as you can. Yeah, yeah, right. As
Yeah,
long as you can. Also, like, don't take your like liberties for granted.
yeah,
Like, in a lot of countries, there's quite worrying developments. Like in Hungary, I know that there's like rule by decree at the moment. So it's,
yeah.
or that
That's
in France, you need like a note that you need to show to the police if you're going outdoors.
yeah,
So it's, yeah,
yeah,
just making the best of the situation. And you can have like online parties or these like Netflix marathons together where you can
yeah,
like watch things together. And
yeah.
yeah, just getting in touch maybe with someone you haven't talked to for a long time, and checking in on your family, your parents, and yeah, just sharing a lot of experiences, but then trying to do that digitally instead.
Yeah. Well, that is really good advice. Thank you for the advice and also the whole new insights and the stories from Sweden. It was really cool. And also,
Yeah, thank you so much.
yeah, yeah, no problem, no problem. Whoa, that were three really interesting stories about the corona crisis in Spain, at Sint-Maarten, and in Sweden. I would like to thank Ole, Sid, and Jana for participating in this podcast. This was the first episode of the Machiavelli Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. Thank you for listening. I wish you all the best, and please stay safe, everyone, and hopefully see you next time. Thank you, guys. Bye bye.